Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Munir Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to episode 215 of the Nora Speaks podcast. I am your host, of course, Munir Muhammad. Thanks for joining me in episode 215. You know, this podcast was an idea that came 6 years ago, and I was encouraged to begin this podcast by a wonderful brother Munir Muhammad, one of the co-founders of CROW. CROW is the Coalition for Remembrance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And Brother Munir was a media star, a media personality, and he was someone who had traveled the earth, speaking to anyone who had anything to say about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and sharing information about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Collecting archives, whether that was in the form of books, newspapers, writings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, film, lectures. And he was someone who I came in contact with, I guess it was about 14 years ago, perhaps. And he was such a good brother, and he was very close to my minister, who was the other person that really championed me in starting this podcast. And my minister is Minister Wasim Muhammad of Temple Number 20. And he is the South Jersey, Delaware Valley representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And these two brothers really encouraged me to launch this podcast as a way to broaden the message that I did in the workshops and in the speeches that I was given locally in the Delaware Valley. And I had given it some thought about, I'd listened to podcasts and I always enjoyed them. I thought that they were just so valuable, just listening to someone do an interview and talking about their journey, and from so many different walks of life. I've listened to interviews of directors, producers, writers, television writers, movie writers, authors, actresses and actors and leaders and teachers. I've listened to so many different interviews and podcasts, and I just thought, it was a wonderful medium and mechanism for sharing information. And so when they encouraged me to do it, I gave it some thought, and I thought, well, why not? One of my beliefs is that we must share information. If you have something good that's not just good for yourself, but good for others, then we should share it. And, sharing doesn't always happen in the same way. Someone could share it in a book. Someone can share it in music. And I shared information in classes and workshops that I did, and some keynotes. And so when they encouraged me to do this, I realized that it was my responsibility. And they were just pointing me in the direction. As a Muslim, specifically a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we have this saying that if you have a bowl of bean soup, then half of that bowl of soup belongs to your sister. And so I know that the great information, the great resources that I have encountered in my life, if they're good for me, then they'll be good for my people. And so I launched this podcast in December 2017, specifically December 11th. And this episode is being released on the 6th year anniversary. And that time has just flown by so quickly. And now Here I am, episode 215. And I realized I never gave much thought to what this podcast would be or what I might be saying years later. What the episode 215, what I would be talking about. I started with my intro episode, and then I had my second episode, then my third episode. I had some interviews in between. I had my 100th episode. And, I can't say I've really looked ahead to think that I had a certain goal other than just sharing information. However, I'm thankful. I'm thankful to everyone that has listened. I'm thankful to everyone that I've had the opportunity to interview. And I've had some wonderful people on this podcast, some fabulous people who are doing great things and making impacts where they are. From my best friends have been guests on the podcast, Shabri Muhammad and Nicole Muhammad. I've had Andrea Lawful Sanders, who now is the host at WURD in Philadelphia. She hosts the radio show, the morning show from 5 to 7. And she is just a marvelous and magnificent woman. I've interviewed business owners, Tarina Nicole, and I've interviewed Suleha Turner. I interviewed Jamil Muhammad and Mandine Muhammad. Both of them, Mandine, not only is he the owner of Legacy Men's Boutique, but he's also a host and producer at Crow TV. Brother Jamil, a host and producer at Crow TV. I should mention that Tarina Nicole, she not only is a teacher, but she also is a woman who produces upcycled items, leather items. And I heard recently that she's going to start making shoes again. Suleha Turner, she's the owner of Essential Nutrients, hair care and body care products. I've interviewed Chris Collins, who is a seated city councilman, but also the CEO of Anointed News Journal. And I found his interview and just talking about his journey just being such an impactful conversation. When I spoke with Shabri Muhammad as an educator, as the executive director or the director of the University of Islam, and also MEL Child Care Center, in her perspective on education. And, as I mentioned, Nicole Muhammad, who's the designer of So Elevated, luxury fashion for women. Just incredible people that I have met in person, and some who I've never met, like Nisha Blackwell of Knots Land Bow Ties. I'd never met her. I saw a commercial that just intrigued me, and I went online to find this sister. And man, the story that she heard in the work that she's doing in Pittsburgh is just remarkable. I'm so interested and fascinated by people's journeys and what they've learned along the way. I've just been a fortunate person. I've been a blessed person. And I've had the opportunity to meet some dynamic people and to hear what they had to say. And I know that we're going to have more interviews on the podcast, and we're going to hear what other people have to say. And when I bring people to the podcast, it's because I believe that they have something remarkable to share. And everyone that I do bring on, I find them to be a remarkable person. I reflect back to Toni Moore, who's an attorney. And actually, she's an attorney of one of a sister, New Jersey sister that I admire a great deal. And that's Tiffany Aliche. Many may know her as the Budgetnista. I interviewed her attorney, Toni Moore, well before I even knew that she was Tiffany's attorney, I just met this woman. I heard her speak and I just thought, I want to talk to her again. Kimmy Carlos, who is the daughter of John Carlos, the remarkable Olympian who took that stand way back when in raising his fist and was blackballed because of it. And the work that she does, Kimmy Carlos, with mental health and substance abuse prevention, a remarkable woman. And so generally, if I'm interviewing someone, it's because I believe that they have something to offer, and I like talking to people. I guess that's part of it too. But most of my episodes have been solo episodes, and just me speaking to the audience. And I pray that what I've shared on this podcast may not be as remarkable as what my guests have shared, but has had some impact and has made a meaningful contribution to the listener. I believe in setting expectations for our community. And I know that this episode, or this podcast rather, is listened more to by women than men. And that's not surprising to me as a Black woman. I would imagine that this podcast would be more interesting to Black women. And that's all right, because I'm a Black woman and I want to share good information with our sisters so that we can contribute in the right way to our communities. And part of that is setting expectations, and we have to have expectations for behavior, for conduct, for what we're doing in our households and in our communities. And I don't shy away from that. Also, I believe in establishing a competing message. I talk about messaging often on this podcast because I find that we are just saturated with filth. We are just saturated with indecency. And I'm not saying that I'm a prude. I'm not a prude, and I understand real life. But I don't believe that we have to glorify in some of the awful, savage, evil nonsense that's out there. I don't think that we should be complacent with it either. And so I will use this podcast in some way as a competing message, because there are the likes of entertainers that are just being allowed or being pushed maybe to make just degenerate content, whether that's in film, whether that's on the radio, whether that's in books. And so because they have a platform, I believe that we cannot exhaust ourselves enough in making a counter or setting up a counter narrative. And so that's what you have with the Nora Speaks podcast. And I have been so supported by my family, specifically my husband. And I'm so grateful to him for him allowing me to be myself. And some women may say, what you mean allowing you? Listen. I'll say that my husband has let me be myself. And more than that, learn who I am and learn what my desires and interests are. And he has not inhibited me. And that has been such a support. When we are given the freedom to be ourselves, to learn who we are. Now, none of that is without parameters, of course. But he has allowed me to be myself and to make the contributions or learn what kind of contributions I want to make in the society with our people, while I'm also maintaining my role in this family. That has been an exceptional blessing. And I don't take that for granted. So I thank him. I thank my God, Almighty God, Allah, for the opportunity and for giving me the wisdom to understand what it is that I should be doing in this time. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, yes, I God told me this. God told me that. I can't say that I've ever had that voice in my ear that some people seem to have. However, I have had beautiful people around me that have just said something that made a thought come to mind. And based on that, I've learned and I've observed that somehow I have been allowed to find my way. And my way is service. I know that now. My way is service. And so I love serving. And I've had so many people create opportunities for me to serve. Even if it's just, an old college friend asking for donations so that she can help senior citizens have a senior citizen luncheon. And now I have the opportunity to donate, to help someone else be of service, to give. And everybody's way is not the same, but I know that my way is in service. My way is giving. And I've had so many people support me along this journey. And this podcast is just one other mechanism that I have to be of service, to give. And I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful to everyone who has listened to the podcast, who have been along with me in this journey, who have endured some of the hiatuses that I've had, just trying to figure out the right way to go about this thing. I did not have a roadmap when I started this podcast. I went online and I tried to find different sources to use to just be successful, to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. How do you even start a podcast? So, the internet has been a great resource. And I've taken a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And just in the exercise of doing it, I've learned what I liked. I learned what I don't like about it. And so I've also had the freedom to change. And I've done that with the podcast. And I'm really happy with the format that I have now. There are some things that have been changed that maybe the audience can't recognize, but that has definitely made this whole process a lot easier for me. But I'm grateful to everyone who listens. I'm grateful to every guest. When you sit down to be interviewed, you're taking a risk. You don't necessarily know what this person is going to do with the interview. But largely every interview I do, there's very little editing. If there's some editing, it's probably something more like audio. But I don't want to cut up what a person has said. What they say is meaningful and is relevant, at least the folks that I bring to this podcast. So I don't want to chop up, what they say, and sometimes with the stutters and I don't want to edit out a whole lot and then make it inauthentic. In this podcast, you've heard trauma helicopters. You've probably heard sirens and horns, and this is real life. And I'm grateful that you have been along with me on this journey. And I don't know how much longer I will be doing this podcast. I mean, I don't have an expiration date for it. I didn't say, I'd be doing this for 5 years and stop. I didn't say I'd be doing this for 10 years and stop. As I said, I really didn't think that far ahead. I just knew I had the obligation, because of what I've been blessed with, to share information with our people. And that's what I've done. And that's what I will continue to do. I love Nora Speaks. I love the podcast. I love this mechanism of sharing information. And perhaps it'll grow in different ways. And I pray that we'll both be here to see how that happens. I look forward to you coming back and listening to episode 216 of the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me in this journey. Thank you for being there as I've learned myself, as I've learned more about podcasting, as I learned to be a better interviewer and host. Thank you so much for being with me along the way. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. What I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, NoraMuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.